Hey YouTubers, what is going on? This is Jonathan bringing you another video on my channel CrazyShadow 303, and today I am bringing you the very first video in a brand new series I am calling CrazyShadow's Top 10. In this video I will be listing my top 10 gaming consoles of all time. Before we begin, if you like this video and want more content, then please leave a like and subscribe to CrazyShadow 303. Details on how to follow my Twitter and Instagram accounts will be shown at the end of this video. So without further ado, let's count down the first installment of CrazyShadow's Top 10. The first thing to point out is that this list is based solely on my opinion, so if you feel you would have ranked them differently, added other consoles, or indeed not listed some of the ones I have, then please let me know your opinions in the comments section below. In making this list, I have considered the following factors: each individual game console's popularity, the range or diversity of the games available to each console, ranging from launch titles to the most anticipated games for that console, my own personal experiences with each console, and also I will be including both home and handheld consoles in this list. However, to give some of the older consoles a chance to be included, I will not be including any of the current generation of game consoles. So sorry guys, that means the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One and the Nintendo Wii U will not be on this list. Now let's get started. Kicking off this list at number 10, we have the Nintendo Gamecube. Released in Japan in September 2001, in America in November 2001, and in Europe in May 2002, the console, known as the Dolphin in early development, has sold more than 21 million units worldwide. The games for the GameCube were loaded onto 1.5 GB 8cm mini DVD discs, which were a lot smaller than regular game discs from other consoles. Nintendo chose these smaller discs so that their games couldn't be easily copied by counterfeiters, and also to reduce production costs as less materials were needed to create the discs. However, because of this, and unlike consoles that followed, this did mean that the GameCube lacked the capability to play regular DVDs. Of course, as a Nintendo console, its best-selling games were of the Mario franchise, with Super Smash Bros. Melee, Super Mario Sunshine and Luigi's Mansion being the standout titles, as well as the Pokemon games Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness. Oh, and the less said about that stupid carry handle at the back of the console, the better. In at number 9 we have the Nintendo Game Boy. The first handheld game console on this list was released in the late 1980s, early 1990s. The original Game Boy underwent a few redesigns, which became the Game Boy Pocket and Game Boy Light. Its successors, the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, and Game Boy Micro, also enjoyed popularity as part of Nintendo's now infamous console family. This console's most notable game is the original Tetris game, which required you to organise falling blocks of various shapes into lines at the bottom of the screen. But the best-selling games of all time for the Game Boy has to be Pokemon Red and Blue, or Pokemon Green in Japan, which first introduced us to Pikachu and his friends as we attempted to catch them all. In at number 8 is the Sega Master System 2. Now this was my very first console that I owned, and this is how I got into gaming in the first place. It is also the console that I played my very first Sonic the Hedgehog game, as Sonic 2, the Master System version of course, was brought with this console. It also had Sega's previous mascot Alex Kidd included, as his Alex Kidd in Miracle World game was built into the system. It was also my first experience playing as Ryu Hayabusa in the original Ninja Gaiden, the very first game I'd ever completed. A special mention must also go to the heavily McDonald's influenced Global Gladiators. There are consoles on this list that are obviously more powerful than the Master System, but on a personal level, this console will always have a place in my heart as the very first games console that I owned, and that's why it's at number 8. Coming in at number 7, we have the Nintendo DS. Released in 2004 in America and Japan, and 2005 in Europe, the natural successor to the Nintendo Game Boy also underwent a few redesigns, which included the DS Lite, the DSi, and the DSi XL. Nintendo developed the DS to rival Sony's PlayStation Portable in the console market wars of the late 2000s. Rather than the game cartridges that the Game Boy used, the games for the DS were put on the smaller game cards, which had capacities ranging from 64 megabits right up to 4 gigabytes. The most successful games for the DS were New Super Mario Bros., a reboot of the original Mario side-scrolling games, and Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, which introduced the Generation 4 Pokemon and characters to the Pokemon franchise. The console also featured the now discontinued Nintendo Wi-Fi connection feature, which allowed players to play their DS games online features. The console's current incarnations are the Nintendo 2DS and 3DS, which to date have sold a combined total of over 70 million units worldwide. So it's safe to say the DS will be with us for quite some time yet. In at number 6 we have the Sega Genesis. Known in Japan and Europe as the Sega Mega Drive, the Genesis sold over 30 million units worldwide. The successor to the Sega Master System, this console was the third of the Japanese company's list of home consoles first released in 1988. It had backwards compatibility with Master System games, provided you had an accessory known as the Power Base Converter in the system's cartridge slot, and was the console where Sonic the Hedgehog really increased in popularity. No surprise then that Sonic the Hedgehog and its sequel, Sonic 2, were the console's best-selling games. Other notable titles for this console are the Streets of Rage trilogy, Golden Axe, Echo the Dolphin, and one of the most popular beat-em-ups of its time, Mortal Kombat. In fact, some of the Genesis games are so popular, even today you can still buy remastered versions of them in the Xbox Live Arcade or PlayStation Network stores of the current generation of home consoles. So the PlayStation and Xbox users of today can still enjoy the retro feel of this console's popularity by playing some of its old games.
Fight!
Number 5 is the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, more commonly known as the Super Famicom in Japan and the SNES in America and Europe. This was the updated version of Nintendo's third generation console, the NES, which, by the way, also had the Famicom name in Japan. Released in 1990 in Japan, 1991 in the US, and 1992 in Europe, this console had sold over 49 million units worldwide until it was discontinued in 2003. Its most famous game, of course, as a Nintendo console, involved the company's mascot, Mario, in Super Mario World, which is also notable as the game that introduced the world to Yoshi, Mario's dinosaur sidekick. Also released on the SNES was Super Mario All-Stars, which contained enhanced remakes of all 3 Super Mario Bros. Games, as well as the original Japanese version of the Super Mario Bros. 2 game, renamed as Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. If you're the type of gamer that loves the feeling of retro, then maybe the SNES and its fairly decent roster of games is for you. Sitting just outside the top 3 at number 4 is the Sega Dreamcast. After the demise of its predecessor, the Sega Saturn, Sega knew this was a make or break for the company's future in gaming. The first console released in the 128-bit era, known as the 6th generation, which also included Sony's PlayStation 2, Nintendo's Gamecube, and Microsoft's original Xbox, the Dreamcast gave us a taste of what was to come, with improved graphics and sound. Its launch in 1998 also introduced us to Sonic the Hedgehog's modern incarnation, with the mascot's first real decent game since the Sega Genesis Sonic & Knuckles Sonic Adventure. This game proved to be the Dreamcast's best-selling title, with 2.5 million copies sold. It featured Amy Rose from the Sonic CD game in her full debut as a playable character, as well as their first appearance for Big the Cat, and Gamma in his only appearance, although his successor Omega would appear in later titles within the Sonic franchise. It also spawned a sequel, Sonic Adventure 2, marking the debuts of Rouge the Bat and this channel's namesake, Shadow the Hedgehog, in a kind of evil twin brother role to Sonic. The Dreamcast is also notable as having the very first online multiplayer game on a home console in Choo Choo Rocket. The most unique of any game console peripherals has to be the Dreamcast VMU, or Visual Memory Unit, which saved game files much like the PlayStation's memory cards, but it also doubled up as its own handheld game system, complete with LCD screen and controller-style D-pad and buttons. Despite all of this, however, this was to be Sega's last ever game console, as they moved to being a software-based company shortly after. But overall, I really enjoyed playing Dreamcast games as a teenager, and so the Sega Dreamcast is number 4 on my list. Taking the bronze spot on my list is the Nintendo 64. Nicknamed the N64, and with its rather oddly shaped controller, this console was released in 1996, along with its launch title, Mario's very first 3D platformer, Super Mario 64, which sold over 11.5 million copies. The Nintendo 64 also introduced the very first 3D game in the Pokemon franchise, Pokemon Stadium, and its sequel, Pokemon Stadium 2 Gold and Silver. Accessories for the N64 included the Rumble Pack, which was the first example of force feedback, a feature which is now built into most console controllers of today, which causes the controller to vibrate under certain situations in the game, like taking damage or firing a gun. Also unique to the N64 was the transfer pack accessory included with the Pokemon Stadium game. With this, players could use Pokemon Court via the Pokemon Red, Blue or Yellow Game Boy games in Pokemon Stadium's main game modes. It also allowed players to play Pokemon Red, Blue or Yellow on the N64 using a special built-in emulator. With the already popular Mario games, combined with the then increasing popularity of the Pokemon franchise, the Nintendo 64 has become, in my opinion, Nintendo's most successful console ever, and that is why I have listed it as my third best console of all time. In the runners-up spot, we have the Xbox 360 from Microsoft. After the success of its predecessor, the original Xbox, Microsoft released the original 360 in 2005. As with most consoles of the 7th generation, the 360 spawned two slimmer, lighter versions of itself, the Xbox 360S in 2010 and also the Xbox 360E in 2013. It was in direct competition with Sony's PlayStation 3 and Nintendo's Wii consoles. The 360 featured Microsoft online service Xbox Live, allowing users to play various online multiplayer games such as the Call of Duty games. Its best-selling game was Kinect Adventures, which utilizes the 360's most famous peripheral, the Kinect, a motion-sensing camera with a built-in microphone allowing players movement to control the games, much like the Nintendo Wii but without a physical controller. The Xbox 360 ceased production in 2016 to make way for Microsoft's current incarnation, the Xbox One. On a personal note, the 360 introduced me to the Call of Duty games, with Modern Warfare 3 being the first Call of Duty game I'd ever played. And without this console, I would have not turned into the gamer I am now. But why is it only number 2? Let's just say that as well as the console that's at number 1, also being a console I have played a lot over the years, just 4 words which at one point described my experience with the 360 stops it from topping this list. Red Ring of Death. Before I reveal my number 1 gaming console of all time, here are a few honourable mentions. some manufacturers have churned out gaming hardware they would rather forget about, here are a couple of dishonourable mentions. And now, the number one gaming console of all time, in my opinion, is the Sony PlayStation. The very first console made solely by Sony Computer Entertainment, the PlayStation, now known as PSX or PS1, was the first home console to sell over 100 million units. It did this roughly 9.5 years after its initial launch in 1995. In 2000, a slimmer, lighter PS1 was released by Sony, starting the slimline trend that is still featured in today's consoles. The best-selling game for the PSX was Gran Turismo, which sold 10.8 million copies worldwide. The very first games to feature Sony mascots Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon was released on the PSX. Its main accessory was the PlayStation memory card, which came in either 8GB or 16GB of storage. Using these was the only way some PlayStation games could save game files, as the console itself had no storage built in for the purpose of saving games. There was also two versions of the PlayStation controller. The original, which did not feature the now infamous two joysticks at the bottom of the controller, and the DualShock controller, which had those double joysticks, and is now the basis of all PlayStation controllers we see today. Based on my personal experiences with this console, there was no better feeling than having a day off school and spending it playing Spyro the Dragon, and completing it in one mammoth 6-hour session. This has become one of my fondest childhood memories, and it's all thanks to this console, and that is why the Sony PlayStation tops this list as my all-time favourite games console.
Hey, Spyro, press the jump button twice to glide, and don't be afraid.
Afraid? Of what?
Falling from high mountain peaks, plummeting into prehistoric glaciers?
Oh, that.
Well, that's all for now, guys. As I said earlier, if you like this video and want to see more of my top 10s, not just on gaming, but other topics as well, such as sport or film and TV, then please leave a like and subscribe to CrazyShadow 303. Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.
Darkness that dozes in the dusk, throw it all away. No one can break you, nobody can tear you. You live an endless life forever. Oh, the darkness that dozes in the dusk, throw it all away. You see a light wherever you go. You have to